Alright, so we'll go ahead and pick up where we left off in the last video. And you'll notice that the page has been cleaned up a little bit. I had made so many marks on the page that I went ahead and cleaned it up. So it looks it doesn't look exactly the same as where the last video left off. But in any event, I think we're ready to start tracing through the algorithm. So remember, you just start at the top and you work your way down line by line. So in the first line, we want to assign the variable large to S1, and S1 is 10, so we're going to assign large a value of 10, and I'm just going to track that in my table. And a lot of times that very first line is called the initialization. I'm initializing the value of the variable large. Right, and so we've already kind of taken care of this first value in the sequence, and that's why our for loop starts with I equals to 2. So in the first iteration in my table, we're going to set I equal to 2, and then we're going to see if anything happens to the value of large. So if S sub I, which is now 2, so now we're looking at S2, if that value is greater than large, which it is because 11 is greater than 10, then, right, so I was looking at this line, which is true, has a true statement, then this next line says we execute that because the if part is true, then we reassign large to what our new value of S sub I is. So we're going to reassign the value of large to be 11. Okay, now we're going to do the for loop until we increment up to 4. So I go back to the first line of the for loop, and I'm going to increment the value of I to be 3. Right, so this is the next iteration through the loop. And so then I check my if statement again. I is now 3, so we're looking at S subscript 3. Is that greater than large? Well, no, because large is 11 and 9 is not greater than 11. So we're not going to do anything. We would not execute this statement. We would skip down and go back to the top of the for loop. And we're going to increment the value of I again to be 4. Right, so now going to the next line in the if statement, we're looking at S subscript 4, which is 6. Take this value, and we ask, is that greater than large? Well, no, because large is still 11 back here in the table. 6 is not greater than 11, so we don't do anything. And now we're done. We were only going to do this for loop up until we get to the value of n, which is 4. So this would be the last iteration of the loop. And we can see that the value of large was stuck at 11, which of course, just by looking at our sequence of 4 numbers, we can tell that the largest should be 11. And so just by making a little table, that's kind of a good way to track the value of your variable and what's happening at each iteration of the loop. And so we have another algorithm or some other pseudocode that does a very similar task, but uses a different type of loop. This pseudocode uses a while loop. This is a very similar idea where we're not specifically told that we're going to increment from one value to another value. We're just told that we're going to keep iterating this loop as long as our value of I is less than or equal to n. So in this case, again, we've got a sequence of 4 numbers. So the value of n is again 4. So when we track our variable I, we're gonna keep looping around these lines of code until until I gets up to be larger than n, which we know is 4 because we have 4 numbers in our sequence. So it works very much the same way, and I'm just going to make another table to track the variables I and large. And so just like in the last problem, or the last example, we start at the top and we start working our way down. Okay, so if we start with the first line, that says set the variable large to be S1, which is 2, so we're going to set that. And we're also going to set the variable I to be 2. So this would be our initialization. In the last one, we didn't really initialize the value of I. We just kind of started with the value. We only initialized the value of large. So that's a minor difference. Okay, now I is set to 2. So what this while statement is saying is keep looping around as long as the value of I is less than 4. All right, so I is 2. So we're going to go into the loop, and we say if S sub 2 is greater than large, so here's S sub 2, that is greater than large, so we execute this statement. We execute that statement, which says set large to this value, which is 9. And then here we're specifically told to increment I by 1, so take the previous value of I and add 1 to it. Right, so I is going to be assigned 2 plus 1, which is 3. So that would be the first iteration of the loop. Now you go back to the top because you're going to keep doing that as long as I is less than or equal to 4. Right, I is now at 3, so we keep going through the loop. Okay, and so we go to this line and we say I is now 3, so if S subscript 3 is greater than large, so here's S subscript 3, that is greater than large because large is currently at 9. Right, then this line says assign large the value of 10, so we can keep track of that. And then this line says update the value of I, which would now be 4. Right, now this while loop is going to increment when I is equal to 4. Right, so we're going to still go back to the top of the loop again, and we're going to run through the lines of code again. So because we still have to check this last value in the sequence. So if S subscript 4 is greater than large, which it is not because 4 is less than 10, so we're not going to do anything there. We're not going to do anything there. And so we don't worry about this line of code because the if statement was false. And so we do increment I by 1. Right now that I is 5, that's how we know that we're done with the while loop, because I is no longer less than or equal to 4. And so we would kick out into whatever was next if there was any code after the loop, but of course in this case there isn't. And so we can go back through our table and see that large got stuck at the value of 10, which of course if we look at the sequence just by inspection we can see that the largest value in that sequence is 10. So just making some kind of table is a good way to track how these loops work. And so hopefully that was an enlightening discussion, if I could talk. That was hopefully an enlightening discussion of how loops work, and hopefully not too confusing.